Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the live recording of our Member Lounge video podcast. So we have two wonderful guests with us today, Amanda Kaiser and Bruce Rosenthal, and I'm your host Farhad Khan. I'm the CEO of Member Lounge. Amanda and Bruce, welcome to the episode. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you do? Amanda, will start with you and then over to Bruce.
Sure. Yeah. I am a member engagement strategist. I am the author of this new book, Elevating Engagement. So it takes you through the entire engagement process, and I'm a keynote speaker.
And I am Bruce Rosenthal. I help associations and nonprofit organizations create sponsorship programs that increase revenue and member value. And after listening to Amanda's intro, I really should say that I'm a sponsorship engagement expert, because that's really what it's about. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next hour or so, about how we engage members and how we engage sponsors.
Wonderful. So my first question, maybe the most important question, I'll start with Amanda here and then Bruce, over to you. What would be your top one or two activities, like top one or two activities to drive member engagement?
Yeah. So I love this question because you go to like a conference or an event and you take like diligent notes and you come back with, I don't know, if you're like me, I'll come back with a notebook of stuff to do. And it's hard parsing through all of the great ideas to figure out what those priorities are. So this is a fantastic question. If I had to call it, when I'm talking about member engagement, I would say it's new member engagement. So those new member orientation or onboarding programs are about as important as you can possibly get. And the reason why is without new member engagement, you can't have lifelong member engagement. And if I had to focus my organization on one thing, it would absolutely be on onboarding programs. And we can definitely dive into, if your attendees have any questions about the mechanics and how they work and strategies and new ideas and trends in onboarding. I've got all of that from the new member engagement study. So I ran some research with my partners at Dynamic Benchmarking, and we had 307 associations weigh in on their new member onboarding tactics and strategies. And we're able to, with that many responses, we could segment by, small associations versus large associations, and, those that are local versus state versus national versus global. So there's a lot of information in there. And I'll drop the link into the chat for the new member engagement study, which is also free. And if you're looking for it, you can just type in new member engagement study into Google and you will find a link right to my site and right to Dynamic Benchmarking to download it.
Amanda, didn't you also have that finding that members who are engaged in the first X number of days are more likely to renew?
Yeah, so really interesting. I started in the association community about 15 years ago. And I think at that point, there was sort of this idea that as long as you engage a new member within a year, you would be safe. If you could engage them right before renewals, then they likely would become a member next year. And then somebody did some research and said, no, it's actually 6 months. And then when I was doing my research, it's actually about 3 days to 3 weeks, which is phenomenally quick. So members join, and very, very quickly, they're trying to figure out if this is the professional home for them, if this is going to be their intellectual family. And they're making that decision about whether they're going to take that next step to engage and perhaps engage kind of permanently in those first 3 days to first 3 weeks. So the sooner we can get them up and running, the sooner we can give them opportunities to engage, the better we are and the better they are.
Okay. Bruce, your take on it?
Sure. So there is definitely a connection between sponsors and member engagement. So most associations should see two big value propositions in having sponsors. Of course, the first thing is money, and that money can be used to enhance member services. I used to run a sponsorship program that was bringing in about 20% of the association's budget, and the largest department in the association was public policy, which brought in $0. So I knew a lot of that revenue from the sponsorship program was being used to support public policy. But the other big value proposition to really position the sponsors as thought leaders and benefit members is around content. So I often talk to organizations, think of the top 6 things that members need. And is it around improving quality in their company or organization? Is it supply chain issues? Is it DEI? Is it how to get younger members engaged in the association by providing better interviewing skills or job enhancement skills? Whatever those 6 things are, find sponsors that can provide that sort of content for members. So that revenue and that content increases engagement of members and will result in better recruitment and better retention of members.
So Bruce, just a follow-up question on that. So you mentioned that like for that association, 20% of the revenues were coming in through sponsorships. So is that normal, or like where do you see the like spread in general? Like how much is non-dues, how much is like dues in general?
The percentage of non-dues to dues varies significantly association to association, and other associations have grants and other sorts of things. I think one thing to keep in mind with sponsorship revenue is much of that is discretionary revenue. So when we have these member programs that are not being funded through other sources, so again, using that association where I used to work, I was the only full-time staff person working on the sponsorship program, and it was bringing in $1.8 million. So kind of do the math, whatever my salary, overhead, even adding in the support I got from others on staff, I think we kind of put pencil to paper once and kind of figured we're probably investing $300,000 to $350,000 in the sponsorship program, and it was bringing in 1.8 million. So I think, and we can scale all these things up and down based on the size of the association. If your association is smaller, don't get scared off by that number. If it sounds too small, if you're a bigger association, ramp it up. But compared to grants and even in many cases dues revenue, which is in many cases spent on dues-related expenses, member-related expenses, that discretionary factor with the sponsorship revenue is something else that can be used, or another factor in engaging members with sponsors.
So my next question, we often see that like members and sponsors like get some engagement with the audience and with the association at different times throughout the year, like whenever they only have a major event or maybe there's a campaign. But what we're finding nowadays is that like there's a lot of like need to stay engaged throughout the entire year, right? Between the members and sponsors like all together. How can we do that?
You know,
go ahead, Amanda.
Okay. I was thinking about, as you said that, Farhad, and then I think this is the perfect question for Bruce. I was thinking about how when I started in the association industry, there were little ways that associations engage with their members, but it might be on a monthly basis. So you get a monthly newsletter or a weekly newsletter, but the big pumbaa of all engagement was always the annual conference. And that was cool at the time, except for members have questions and problems and goals and challenges 365 days a year. And so in the time that I've been in the association community, there's more online communities. There's more ways that associations are on all the time, not just once a year, not just once a month, not just once a week, but you can get into the online community and you can get information on the website and all of that anytime that you want. And so I think as we've expanded the time horizon for member engagement, I'm guessing we've expanded the time horizon for sponsors as well. Is that kind of what you're feeling like, Bruce?
Yeah, here's the real win-win. So you're right, Amanda. Members have challenges and needs for information throughout the year, and that might sync up with the time of the annual conference, or they might come up with a big challenge a month after the conference. What do they do then? So members need information year-long, and sponsors want to be positioned year-long. Doesn't mean every day, but I've talked to sponsors who have said, well, the annual conference was great, and we market 365 days a year. So what about the 362 days of the year when there's not a conference, when there's not an expo? How can members learn about what we have to offer? And I think the other factor, the metric in marketing is you have to hear about a company or a product 7 times before it really resonates. Mm-hmm. So if we can work with sponsors, not on sales, but on educational materials, and it might be, and it might be 4 or 5 times a year. It might be a listserv survey and something at the conference and a white paper and being on a webinar panel. So over the course of the year, that company becomes known. for having expertise in that area. And I think we can also, in many cases, work with sponsors not on their, because I think there's a question in the chat about tying thought leadership and implying, will that become a sales pitch and will there be pushback from staff or board? Companies have a whole range of expertise where they can be positioned well that is not directly tied to their product or service. So does the company have expertise in DEI, women in leadership, providing interview skills for new folks in the field or the profession? So if we can involve companies in that way, it gets their name out there, but never mentions their product or service.
Right, right. And I guess like another finding that we are seeing on our end, so we are very active online, right? So we host like 3 online events every month. And we have a lot of people coming to our online events. And I spoke at the CSAE annual conference, the Canadian version of ASAE. I spoke at the conference like last week, and lo and behold, like room full of people. And in my talk, I asked them, okay, how many people are subscribing to my podcast, and how many people have joined one of our webinars? Not one hand went up. And we know that we have one of the top association podcasts out there. Not one hand went up in the in-person event, right? What does that tell me? That tells me that by going to the event, we are like meeting new people, the people who are usually not online, right? And then like by having the online community that we have and by doing online events, we are reaching a different group of people in general. So I think like there's room for both. So some people are more active in the in-person events and the others are more active like online throughout the entire year. Do you see that as well? Or like, do you have a thought on that?
I totally do. So it's really fascinating when COVID came and we moved all of the in-person stuff online. What I think a lot of association metrics saw was that the person, for a while, their current conference registrants were their online registrants, and then at some point they realized that they were starting to get this whole other audience of registrants, and so then when we started going back in person, there was a couple of associations that said, phew, we don't have to do this virtual thing anymore. We're just going to do the in-person thing. And I kind of panicked for them at that particular point, because I knew that there's people who can't travel because of budget or family or a million other reasons, because they're not the CEO, so they don't get to go to the conference. And so to the extent that associations can do both in person and virtual, I believe what we're seeing is we're seeing some crossover in audiences, but a lot of different folks right now.
Well, and I think the other factor with, as Amanda said, going virtual, which made things accessible to anybody, it made it much easier for corporate sponsors and others to reach our members. And I know that when I ran a sponsorship program at an association 10 years ago, if a company said, oh, we want to reach and teach your members, I said, that's easy. I'll give you the rules. Here's the list you can reach out to. Here's when our webinar schedule is. We can get you on the schedule in 8 months. Here's when the conference is. Submit a proposal and we can let you do the conference. And then everything went virtual and people became real used to using Zoom, of course, and other virtual platforms and using social media. So then companies said, oh, so we can put out a white paper on social media, create an online community, and reach them in Zoom. So we don't have to wait for the association to either reach members or teach members. Mm-hmm. So one of my colleagues talked to a company that has created an online community of 5,000 members of the association. And the company's smart enough to know they're not just pushing out sales stuff, they're pushing out white papers and webinars and subscribe to our podcasts. And members are going there. Companies wouldn't be doing those sorts of things if members weren't going there. Now, I think it's always important to add to this, which again ties into engagement. Companies would rather do those sorts of activities with the association to align the brands, to go together and engage the members. But if associations are like, oh, you can't have the list and you can't do the webinar for 6 months and you have to wait till the next conference, then companies are going to be like, we can go out and do that next week.
Right. And I guess like what's happening nowadays is that like a lot of the sponsors, they're building their own lists. So like we're getting to a point where like our own list will become like bigger than some of the association executive like associations, right? So because like we are very active in marketing, so we should never get to a point where the sponsor thinks that our list is bigger than the association, right? The moment that happens, then that's a problem for the associations, for their existence in general.